Hello and warm welcome to MedSynapse podcast series where we bring you insightful conversation with leading experts in medical field. Hi, I'm your host Dr. Smarika Bhatt and today I'm honored to have a conversation with Dr. Shambo with the future of safe prescribing in clinical pharmacology. Dr. Shambo Samrat is a clinical pharmacologist with a gold medal in DM pharmacology and advanced training in critical care, allergies, and diabetes. With multiple fellowship and national recognition, he bridges the cutting edge science with real world clinical practices. And if you're wondering how a one person can manage to do all of the tasks, trust me, you are not alone wondering that. Welcome, Dr. Shambo, to the podcast. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Thank you very much.
So without further ado, Dr. Shambo, we'll start with our first question so how do a pharmacogenomic and personalized medicine influences drug therapy today and what are the real world challenges to implement them?
Yeah. So I think pharmacogenomics is something which is now still evolving, especially in the sector where I am practicing, that is diabetology. Yes, there are good number of evidences while treating our oncology patient with the help of pharmacogenomics. But still, I must say, this concept is evolving. So as you are asking me about pharmacogenomics, I think very often we get this type of confusion between two terminologies. I think many of us who are watching today, they are interested in drug science, medicine science, clinical pharmacology, and therapeutics. So let me clear about these two important terminologies. One is pharmacogenomics and one is pharmacogenetics. We need to understand certain differences between these two. So basically, the pharmacogenetics or pharmacogenomics, if we can say as a whole, these are the science which help us to understand the genetic influence on drug response. Now, when we talk about pharmacogenetics, especially it focuses on how a single gene and that single gene variant affect the drug response. But when we talk about pharmacogenomics, it examines the effects of all genes, that means genome, on drug response. This is the basic difference. So when we talk about pharmacogenetics, often involves studying large effects from a small number of DNA variants. And when we talk about pharmacogenomics, it involves studying a large number of genetic variants across individuals or population. So we need pharmacogenetics to aim at tailoring the drug therapy based on individual genetic makeup. And when we try to seek or to understand the complex genetic influence on drug efficacy and safety, then we talk about pharmacogenomics. So pharmacogenomics covers the entire genome. And when we talk about pharmacogenetics, it is more focused on individual genes. It looks at specific gene-drug interaction and often applied in personalized existing treatment. So we got some information from one specific gene and we try to apply that to get the precision medicine. But when we talk about pharmacogenomics, it explores broader genetic influences, guide drug discovery and development by identifying new genetic targets. So these are two important differences, I must say. Now, when you talk about pharmacogenes, which actually not only determine the drug effects, but also the concentration. So, as a whole, we can say the pharmacogenes in drug response, the relationship, then it will not only determining the drug effects, but also the pharmacogenes determine the concentration of the drug. Sometimes we know the genes encode when the genes encodes for specific enzymes, specific transporters, or even we know they are the drug targets. So if there are certain variants, so that will cause difference in drug response. So we need to understand. Very common example, I think, from our undergraduate days, we had learned the warfarin saga, the cytochrome enzyme, especially the 2C9. Similarly, when we are using today clopidogrel, which is a metabolizer of cytochrome 2C19. So if there are some variants happen, so that will ultimately influence the drug response. So these are the pharmacokinetic variants because they are the metabolizing enzyme. At the same time, the pharmacodynamics that may changes. We know if I want to prescribe carbamazepine to a patient, we need to check whether the HLA-B1502 genotype is there or not. If it is there, we should avoid that because in that subset of the patient, the carbamazepine is going to cause Stevens-Johnson syndrome. So we need to avoid that. And those immune drug responses, we can say pharmacological, immunological, receptor interaction. So that specific HLA phenotype and the pharmacological agent, that is a drug, the carbamazepine, they will have some interaction and that will lead to devastating reaction. So I think there are important role of pharmacogenomics, and I think this is a bridge. We know the pharmacokinetics, which help us to understand the drug concentration, which ultimately tell us how much drug will go to the systemic circulation, site of action, like that, the pharmacokinetics parameter, the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. At the same time, the pharmacodynamics at the level of receptors, ion channels, enzymes, or what we had just mentioned about that pharmacological, immunological receptor interaction. So immune system. So this interaction may be changed if there is something in genetic polymorphism present in us. And that ultimately, because this pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamics ultimately will say what is going to be the clinical response, whether we'll reach the drug efficacy or we'll have some subtherapeutic response or we have some supratherapeutic response or drug toxicity. So pharmacogenomics that map the genetic polymorphism actually will tell us what is going to happen. So I think in future, now we got certain specific genomic testing. I think they are mandated, especially when we talk about pharmacogenomics. It is a costly affair. So just like some specific costly drug, we need to do pharmacoeconomic evaluation. So here also we need to do certain biomarkers for pharmacoeconomic or cost effectiveness studies. So from those studies, I think we know that while starting abacavir, we need to do some HLA phenotype testing, HLA-B5701 if there, so there is higher chance of Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Similarly, if it is HLA-B5801 and I am using allopurinol, so allopurinol induced Stevens-Johnson syndrome chance will be more. So these are important area, pharmacogenomics, and I think in case of diabetes mellitus management, the field is still evolving, but sulfonylurea, we know the CYP2C9 is the metabolizing enzyme, and it actually inactivates the sulfonylurea like glimepiride. So if something happen in that metabolism, something absent, it becomes if CYP2C9 become the slow metabolizer. So what happened? The the glimepiride concentration will be high inside us, and that will lead to toxicity, hypoglycemia. Similarly, if it is overacting, super metabolizer, so that time there will be more inactive metabolites that will quickly the inactive metabolites will be formed, and that will ultimately lead to reduced efficacy of sulfonylurea. So these concepts are important, and new drugs, I think many of us know that now the GLP-1RA and SGLT2 inhibitors are the cornerstone in the diabetes management for different reasons, but they also behave differently in different patients. So when we talk about precision medicine, the phenotype of the patient, genotype of the patient, we need to evaluate. And in that tool, I think the pharmacogenomics is going to help us a lot. We had published a very interesting review article. If you have time, you may go through that. That had been published in a international journal, Clinical Diabetology. The title of our article is Decoding the Genetic Blueprint. So decoding the genetic blueprint, how we can use our personalized medicine in type 2 diabetes through pharmacogenomics. We had discussed in that paper. If you are interested, you may go through that, because diabetes is a field where genetic genome-wide association studies are important. There are multiple studies are ongoing, specific targets, be it the pharmacokinetic parameters like metabolizing enzyme, or be it the target, especially the GLP-1R receptor focus or certain genes for DP4 inhibitors. They are the area. These are the area where we can make some more research. There is no doubt in that personalized medicine is key for any chronic disease management, for any disease management, and for diabetes management too. And these genetic variants we had discussed that can influence both the drug efficacy and safety. And they could help us to identify new therapeutic targets. So let's give importance on comprehensive genetic screening. So I think this is what I want to mention to your query.
So, from our audience, if somebody wants to have the access towards the study Dr. Shambo has mentioned, so we'll put down the link in the description box so anybody can have the access towards that study as well. So, all right, Dr. Shambo, that was such a detailed answer for our previous question. So, let's move on to next question of our interview is about polypharmacy. So, what drug interaction do you frequently encounter, and how do you minimize the errors in outpatient settings?
So, polypharmacy is an important topic. I think all of us should give emphasis while prescribing on this issue of polypharmacy, especially when we are treating our elderly population, because they are having multiple comorbid conditions, multimorbidities. So in that, there is higher chance of having polypharmacy. So for an example, if we go through the Atlantic, and two sides of the Atlantic, one side Europe and one side America, both sides, the polypharmacy prevalence is almost 40 to 50%. So it is quite high. And if we talk about India, there was a systematic review and meta-analysis, and they had calculated the pooled prevalence of polypharmacy, which was almost 50%. But polypharmacy, when we are talking, it is 5 or more than 5 drugs in a prescription. Now, what is important? The potentially inappropriate medication use we need to reduce. And that is why when there is polypharmacy, we need to be vigilant to identify those potentially inappropriate medications. In India, there were studies which had shown almost 30% of our elderly population, they are having potentially inappropriate medication use. Even we had conducted one or two studies where the numbers are same. And when we talk about polypharmacy, as we had talked 5 or more medication per prescription, it is a quantitative definition. So when we talk about quantitative definition, the numbers, they are okay. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge this number should include all the over-the-counter drugs, other traditional or complementary medicines the patient is consuming. But there are certain controversy also. While I am talking about the numbers, it is 5 medication use, 5 or more medication use. Now, I am giving you one example. One patient is taking one fixed dose combination of glimepiride, metformin, and pioglitazone. 3 molecules, 3 drugs in a fixed dose combination. So whether I can call it as 1 medication or 3 medication, there is still no clear-cut consensus. But for all practical purpose, we need to consider that 3 drugs, because as we had discussed, when we have polypharmacy, the most important issue, we need to screen for potentially inappropriate prescription drugs. So for that purpose, we need to take care of all the other drugs. And there, the fixed dose combination, we need to take care of glimepiride, metformin, pioglitazone individual. And that is why sometimes we need to give emphasis on the qualitative definition, or rather qualitative evaluation of polypharmacy, not only that number 5. So when we talk about qualitative evaluation, there we need to acknowledge the appropriateness of therapy. That is the more important part than the numerical counts. So we need to understand whether potential benefits outweigh the potential harms. Here, as we are using the terminology potentially inappropriate medications, we need to understand the definition of that potentially inappropriate medication. So medications with ineffectiveness or some high risk benefit ratio for a particular individual or group of individuals. So that is potentially inappropriate medication. So I think when we have potentially inappropriate medication, we need to reduce that. Here, someone may argue that polypharmacy is always associated with overprescribing. There are good number of studies which had shown that polypharmacy is not only associated with overprescribing but also underprescribing. And when we talk about underprescribing, that is generally, I am talking about one patient. For an example, the patient is diabetic, taking 4 or 5 anti-diabetic agent, 1 vitamin, 1 calcium, 1 iron tablet. Along with that, the patient had been prescribed with statin. But what happened? The patient is not taking statin. If we ask why to the patient will say, I am taking so many drugs. Now my cholesterol is normal. Why I shall take statin? So this is a very common situation in our country. We will take pantoprazole daily. We will take vitamin tablets daily, but we will not take statin. So this chances increases if there is polypharmacy. So polypharmacy always associated, many times associated with underprescribing. That we need to understand. As we are talking about polypharmacy, I think this is a very close topic to my heart. To tackle polypharmacy, we had proposed one solution. and that is known as CPRRF. We know that in our border, in our country, the CRPF Jawans, they are always having some vigilant eyes on our enemies. This CPRRF, also an important strategy which could have a vigilant eye on this potentially inappropriate medication use, and that can help us to promote safe prescribing. What is that CPRRF? CPRRF means Clinical Pharmacological Reconciliation, Review and Feedback. And especially when we talk about CPRRF, we propose 10 steps. It had been published in the Journal of Clinical Pharmacology. I can share that article details, and also later we had tried to establish this concept, how we can ensure elderly patient care safety, and that had been published in the Journal of Indian Academy of Geriatrics. Both those articles I can share with you all. Request you all to go through that. You will get multiple areas in details. The thing is that we need to evaluate if the patient is taking some medicine that is unnecessary or redundant or not. If something wrong medicine is being prescribed for a specific indication or not. For unnecessary or redundant or contraindicated medication, we need to do deprescribing. We need to identify certain omissions and commissions, especially during transition of care. Patient is in ICU, then patient came to HDU, and then patient came to general ward. In ICU, the patient was receiving pantoprazole IV, intravenous. Now, in ward, patient had been prescribed with oral pantoprazole. But if we do the reconciliation, we'll get the patient is taking simultaneously pantoprazole oral and intravenous pantoprazole. So we need to prevent that. So transition of care is very important issue. Often we give the discharge advice to our patient that you will take this medication at your home. That time we forget to tell the patient, please don't take the previous medication which you were consuming before admission. So patient, when going back to home, they will take the new medication on top of the old medication, and that will cause some dangerous outcome. So we need to be extra careful during this transition of care. We need to tailor the dose, and those should be adjusted to the individual need and perspective. Next, how we can prevent, minimize and manage the adverse drug reaction. How to improve the treatment adherence. Now we talk about accessibility. And when we talk about accessibility, it is the multiplied product of 2A another. One is affordability and another is availability of medication. So especially when we talk about adherence, we also need to consider the affordability and availability of the particular drug. And that is important while doing that CPRRF. Then how to individualize the treatment accommodating all the patient factors, the creatinine value, the hepatic function, how to rationalize polypharmacy. So polypharmacy is not bad. Sometimes it has a legitimate need. If I am suffering from heart failure, I am suffering from diabetes, I am suffering from hypertension, I am suffering from COPD. So I need 10 or 12 drugs. There is no harm in that. But we need to rationalize that polypharmacy, especially if I am elderly. And the most important part, previously, maybe 20 years, 30 years back, our focus was on disease-oriented evidences. But now we are moving from DOEs, that is disease-oriented evidences that matters. We are moving towards poems. So do is to poems. What is poem? Patient-oriented evidences that matters. So that is very important. Our goal should be how we can enhance the quality of life. And for that, the CPRRF plays a critical role. And we had conducted one randomized controlled trial. It had a factorial design amongst elderly type 2 diabetics, where we had used this clinical pharmacological intervention in terms of clinical pharmacological reconciliation, review, and feedback. And on top of that, also we had used that one device known as MedPer, which actually improves the medicinal adherence. So we used that, and that arm had shown some benefits in terms of adherence, in terms of lesser adverse events, in terms of more percentage of patients entering the target HbA1c less than 7%. Even in the clinical pharmacological intervention group, the benefit had been shown. So I think this could be an important area. And if we start practicing, especially all the medical colleges, they have very good departments of pharmacology. So they, I think, need to start this practice of clinical pharmacology consultation through their OPDs. And I think that is very important. Our central government should focus, different state government should focus how they can utilize this pharmacologist who are there in different medical colleges. They are not only doing the different academic duties, they can be utilized for these patient care activities. And I think that can open up new avenues for the pharmacologist, clinical pharmacologist, because if we can be involved in patient care, the patient outcome will be improved. The drug-induced disorders, drug-induced atrocities can be minimized. Okay. And for that, I think this is the duty of our regulators. We need to take our pharmacology department from the academic building and research setup to patient care. And ultimately our goal of patient outcome improvement, we can reach that. In US, the medication error related death are the third leading cause of death. So I think the numbers are also high in India. We all must be agreed upon that. If we use this service through different medical colleges, OPDs, so that could be beneficial for our patient. So I think this clinical pharmacological reconciliation, review, and feedback is an important part for all of us. We need to promote this, and I shall share a few of our studies with you all, so that you will get an idea what we are actually doing in our private clinics or government setups with clinical pharmacological intervention while dealing with this polypharmacy.
Correct. So that was a very well put together answer, Dr. Shambo. Let's move on to the next question. So we'll touch on the age of innovation. How do you evaluate new drug delivery system, biologics, and biosimilar in light of evolving evidences regulatory framework?
Yeah. So I think this is an important area which is evolving in India. And if you go by our statistics also, the number of clinical trials, it is now moving up, and especially when we talk about the biosimilar, or in India, rather we should use the terminology similar biologics. They are not just like the innovator versus generic like that, because when we talk about biosimilar or similar biologics, they need to undergo through the magnifying glass of detailed non-clinical evaluation, uh, different measures are there, and after that they should have undergone the phase 1 clinical trial and phase 3 clinical trial. Then it will get the permission to be marketed or get the approval. So biosimilar or similar biologics, different Indian companies, pharmaceutical industry, they are making it, and I think that could be very much helpful, as we were also talking about accessibility to the care, where accessibility, there is two important term, that is availability and affordability. So biosimilar or similar biologics definitely improves the both the availability and the affordability part. Next is the generics. Again, I think you had asked about the generics. So generics is an important area, because we actually acknowledge India as the pharmacy capital of world. So when we talk about pharmacy capital of world, mostly we talk about these generic medications, because India supplies generic medications to all the different parts of the world. And even in the generic, actually the two important study we need to do, one is certain chemical matching, and apart from that we need to do a dissolution distribution studies, and then the bioavailability, bioequivalent studies. There are increasing number of BAB centers now in India, where because of the increasing in demand of generic drugs, but of course we need to be vigilant on the quality of the generic drug products. And I think the next question you had asked about the device. So again, when we talk about device development also undergo the clinical trial, device trial process. And when we talk about device trial process, I think we have the schedule M, especially there we can divide the different devices according to 4 classes, depending on the risk level. If it is very low risk, then we, for an example, thermometers or some tongue depressors, then it will come under the class A. If it is the risk level is low to moderate, for an example, hypodermic needles or some suction equipments we used in critical care setup, so they are the low moderate risk devices. And for lung ventilators or some bone fixation plates, they are the moderate to high risk, so class C devices. And high risk devices, that means the heart valves or implantable defibrillator, so they are the high risk devices. So depending on the device category, for an example, generally the class A or class B not required the thorough clinical trials. So here the pilot 2 phases, one is pilot clinical trial, and then the pivotal trial, where they check it in larger population. For drug trials, we all know that there is a dedicated phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trial, and then, but for the device there is 2 part, one is pilot and pivotal clinical trial, and they have to do, just like the drugs, they have to do the assessment of the efficacy and safety for each devices. There are certain examples, as I had mentioned, for low risk or low to moderate risk class A or class B devices. There could be a wave of dedicated pilot or pivotal clinical trial. So I think yes, India is now innovating, and lot of innovating products are now coming up. So it is our duty to foster this innovation.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining in, Dr. Shambo, today. It was a very enriching session with you today. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you
very much, MedSynapse. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I shall share all those articles
correct,
for
correct.
for our
I'll share in the description box. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in. And remember, if you're a healthcare professional who is eager to delve deeper into medical topics or have questions, do not hesitate to join our MedSynapse platform. MedSynapse platform is not just a resource, it's a dynamic space where you can connect with your medical peers, participate in meaningful discussions, and contribute to the ongoing evolution of healthcare. So until next time, stay tuned, stay healthy, take care.